In this video, I'm going to show you how to layer your basses. Sometimes you can simply get away with a sub bass and a main bass for your tracks, but other times you want them to be a bit more complex. And this is where sound design comes in and where layering is super important. And here we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different layers. And in this video, I'm going to break down each layer. So if I just show you this EQ here, I like to break my basses down into 3 sections. So you've got the low end all the way along here, up until about 150 to 200. And then you've got the mid-range all the way along here, all the way to about 2 to 3,000 here. And then you've got the high range all the way up to about 17,000. So these are your 3 sections you want to work with. So let's break down bass 1. So let's listen to it. So this is simply a really heavy sub bass. So let's have a look at the Serum preset first. So this preset is on my website as part of the bonus pack that you can get your hands on when you buy any of my production collections. But let me give you a little quick insight into it. So it's simply a sine wave and an inharmonic sine wave, and then we've got just a down sample distortion on it. And you get this really cool tonal sounding sub bass. And then the post-processing that's on it is simply a sidechain to the kick group, and then we've got an EQ cutting out any of the mids and the high range. And this is because we don't want any phasing issues later down the line when we add in the other basses. And then all I've done is added an OTT to it, which you can see here with these settings. And that's just to give it more grit. And then I've just applied a limiter. That utility is just applying some bass mono to it just to make sure the sub bass is completely mono. So now let's listen to the second bass. So with the second layer, it's the same patch with a few different things added. But instead of focusing on the low end with this patch, I'm now focusing on the mid to high range. And this is just giving the track more depth. So all I've done is added this EQ, and then number 8 I've flipped. So originally it was this one, now it's this one. And again, I've got some sidechain on it, doing exactly the same thing. All the sidechain is doing on all the basses is exactly the same. And then I've got an OTT on it again, which you can see here. And then I've got another EQ cutting out the highs from 500. So essentially what this sub bass is doing is adding more layers from around the 150 mark here, because we've cut it off, to here. So essentially it's doing something like this. And it's just building up the sound in the mid range. And then again, we've got a utility on the end just to stop any clipping. So these 2 basses together sound like this. So on its own, it sounds like this. And then layered, it just sounds stronger overall. Now let's add another bass line, and this is our first mid to high range bass. And this one sounds like this. So let's have a look at this patch. Again, it's from my bonus presets, and I've just gone in and edited it a little bit to give it a unique sound. So let's listen to this. So it's quite a simple basic shapes layout, a sustained bass that's got a compressor on it, and then it's just got the sidechain, which is giving it the bouncy effect. There's really heavy sidechain on this. And then I've experimented a little bit with this new plugin, with this plugin I recently got called RC20. And you can give it like some noise, background noise. You can give it some wobble, some distortion, some digital, some like reverb space, and some magnetic. And I've just gone in and applied a little bit of everything and then put the magnitude really low. And you can hear the difference. So I'll play it with and without. So this is without. And this is with. So it just adds a little bit of depth to that bass. Now we've added an EQ. And as you can see, I'm now focusing the mid to high range here. So I've got from 200 to 1200, as I didn't want too much of the high range here. And then with that layered with these three basses, now it gives this sound. Now you just want to make sure there's no phasing issues, because there is a little bit of clashing with the basses. So the second bass that I showed you is clashing from 200 to 500 here, but I can't really hear any phasing in my headphones. So this is okay to me. If I could hear it, I'd just get rid of the 200 up to like 500. So I do something like this, something like this. But to me, it sounds better at about the 200 mark. It just feels like there's more depth and I can't really hear any phasing issues at all. So I left it. If we listen to the 3 layers with just the drums now, you can hear this. Whilst that sounds good, it feels like there's like some sort of energy missing from the drop, and it just feels like it needs one more layer. So what I've done is found this last layer after loads and loads of experimentation. I must have gone through like 200 plus presets and like modified them and all sorts until I eventually found this one. It took a long time, but I feel like it's worth it to give it this extra layer. Now let's look at the 4th layer. Let me show you what it sounds like. This actually ended up being a preset that I made from scratch to get this sound. And you can see here it's a basic MIDI and a basic shapes. And it sounds like this. Again, it's a sustained bass with the envelope on. Just on the cutoff like that. And then it also is on the EQ here. In the mid to high range. And we've got distortion, compression, chorus, EQ. And I think it's also on something I've turned off now. Might be on here, yeah, which I've turned off. So it's just on those two bits. So in terms of the post-processing on this, again, we've got a sidechain, EQ cutting out the lows because we don't want it interfering with the sub bass. Then we've got this OTT on it at 32 depth, and then a limiter on it. And then all together, these basses sound like this. So let's do it in order. So 1, 1 and 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4. And if you look at the volumes, so I do all the processing bits on here, and then I do the mix down bit on here, as you can see. So we've got -2, -2, -1, and then +1.6, because I feel like this is the most heavy hitting synth, so it needs to be the loudest. And now we have got one more sound at the bottom, but this is simply just a white noise effect. And all that is a white noise I've found in Serum, just AC Hum 1 in Organics. And that's it, just on sustained bit of EQ, and that's it. And it just gives it even more depth. So with the white noise, it sounds like this. You can barely hear the white noise, but I feel like it just adds a little bit extra. So it sounds like that for the first 1, 2, 3 bars, and then the 4th bar, there's a little bit of variation where it introduces another synth, and it sounds like this. And this is just another Serum preset. And instead of doing +4, I've done +7 here. So it gets this sound. And it's also quite higher in pitch. And then this is just it's a Moonboy synth actually that I've just gone in and edited. And I turned off the delay and the reverb because it was too much. And again, it's just basic shapes with some of this processing on as well. I don't know if any of this is actually turned on, because I have gone in and completely transformed the sound. A little bit on the EQ there. And yeah, and that gives a little bit of variation at the end of each section. And the post-processing on this, another sidechain, of course, EQing out the lows. An OTT, as you can see. And then a Pro Q again, just because sometimes when you add a OTT, it can add elements back in the low end again here. So I'm just EQing it out again, just to make sure it's not just like interfering with the sub bass. And of course a limiter. And you might be wondering, where's Decimort 2 today? Well, I normally only use like really, really powerful plugins when it's just 1 or 2 Serum basses. When you're like layering loads and loads of basses like this, you don't want to go too over the top with processing. So I feel like OTT is enough just to give it that fullness of the sound when you're layering it loads of other sounds. Otherwise it's just going to sound crazy with like Decimorts on and everything. So once you've focused on the low end with the sub, making it sound really fat, and then focused on the mid to high range and cut out around 17k, you should get something that sounds like this. And then I've just gone onto the bass bus and I've added this EQ here. And what this is doing, it's boosting a little bit of the low end, and then it's scooping out some of the low to mid range, and this is just where you get a lot of muddiness. So I figured if I scoop this out, it would sound a lot cleaner. And then again, just along here. So if we play it, you can see we're covering pretty much the whole spectrum of sound with this bass. And you've got like a massive full bass, which can go crazy in tracks if this is what you're looking to make. And one last thing, I've also applied a little bit of reverb on my send channels down here to here. And we're just using Valhalla Room for that on a very low decay, and then EQing out all the lows so it's just focused on the highs. And that gives you even more depth. So with this bass, you've covered all the grounds, and then you should get something that sounds like this. Thank you all for watching. If you want to learn even more about producing and become experts at making bangers, make sure to check out my website. There's courses and sample packs to get your hands on, and I'll see you all in the next one.